And welcome back to PSA TV. I am Christy Singh, and on set with me I've got the President of the Police Social Welfare Association, Inspector Michael Seals.
Inspector Michael Seals.
Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
And how are you this morning?
Very good. Hostile to come here, but I'm good.
Well, some days they are early mornings.
Yep.
First of all, let me commend you on your stint as President of the association. I know elections were recently.
Yes, June 24th.
Yeah, and we've got a new executive coming up soon.
Yeah, new executive. New executive led by Mr. Gideon Dixon, acting inspector, and Mr. Ford, who is the secretary of the association now. They are the president and secretary-elect that leading a team of 6 persons.
You've held that position for the maximum 3
terms. Yeah.
How has it been for you thus far?
Well, thus far, it's a bittersweet road. Part of what has happened during that time, you must have a vision, and based on our vision, what we would have tried to accomplish. I think the final part of the puzzle for us is acquiring a property in Caribou, China. That was the final piece of the puzzle. But I know as it was coming to the end of my presidency, there wasn't the opportunity for works to begin and nor completed. So I think that was really how that played out for us. But it is a bittersweet moment because as much as I have been serving, it's as much as I want to say goodbye.
Yeah. So you're excited to say goodbye? That's what you're saying?
Yes, I'm excited to say goodbye. I think I have repositioned myself in terms of what I want for my future. And I think that's important because of the fact that you have to understand you don't know what is out there. And when you get out there, then you would understand, all right. So I'm kind of excited about it in terms of challenging myself to see how far I can go, what I could actually do. I'm in the final year of my doctorate, so that's in itself is another piece of excitement because I must complete. And in completing, that again opens a lot of doors to me.
Tell me first of all, what would have led you to get involved in the police service?
Association?
Yes.
I'd blame Mr. Ramisa. Ramisa, who is a brother to me, a colleague, we have been close. It emanated from a case that we both did. And Mr. Ramisa was deciding to go into the association. I was representing somebody and he was prosecuting the person. So I had I kind of, how to say, got ahead of him in terms of, I would have won that matter for that person.
Yeah.
So Mr. Ramisa decided to invite me to come with him on his team to be a part of the association. At the time I was actually planning to leave the police service at that point. I had now finished, had now been appointed to the bar as an attorney at law in Trinidad and Tobago. So I was thinking about going out to practice law. But with Ramisa's invitation, I told him the only reason I would come is if we win, I would stay. And we did win. And so that has been the history for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I know wherever you see you
see Mr. Ramisa.
You see Mr. Ramisa.
Yeah.
But what are some of the positives, or what is something that stands out to you most when you look back at yourself and your presidency? What stands out to you most?
Well, one of the things I know is, you have to look at the environment. I mean, for the first 6 years, Mr. Ramisa was in fact the president of the association. And that time there was a heavy concentration on negotiations. And I must say, hats off to Mr. Ramisa, he did very well because we were able to secure 9% by 14% by $1,000 tax-free, which benefited the whole of the protective services community. And I think that's something that they have to hail him for. When I got in my presidency, it's not about wasn't about doing what Mr. Ramisa was doing, about continuing our vision. And part of what I wanted to do, because of what we had to do in the first 6 years, my decision was to reshape the organization and have the organization as a credible organization. So it's about changing its corporate image, changing its appeal to the membership and to the wider public in terms of being a major stakeholder in terms of law enforcement in the country. So that has been my journey and trying to replace that whole stigma of what had come before. So I know I've done a pretty job with the help of Mr. Ramisa, and I saw the successes of it in terms of what we have benefited in the last couple of months as an association.
In terms of negotiations, are there any pending negotiations as is?
Currently, we are at the table with negotiations. Presently, I think that from a strategic point, we had done the best that we could have done for over the years in acquiring that 14%, which Mr. Amasa would have gotten. So now we had systematically said that we are fighting for 13.5% because, you know, when you're at the table, you're not at the table with the CP alone, you're at the table with the entire country. So you have to think wisely. The new group of persons who come in, we have to wait to see the direction they take and what they would want us to do. Because essentially, the experience that both Ramasa and I have is second to none. I think is really what they, if they need our help, what they intend to do. So I think that's where we're at, and we need to give them the opportunity to lead the organization.
In your opinion, what are some of the challenges police officers face on a daily basis?
I think some of the biggest challenges is still getting that type of respect for the job that they do. I think a lot of persons in the countries, in the communities, various communities, depending on where you come from, you have to look at the policeman as being integral to peace and tranquility in the area that you reside. I think some of the persons miss that and how they say, diminish the invaluable contributions that policemen make to society. And I think if we don't understand how we translate that, and then you have the media taking its part in terms of really putting out some of the stories in terms of the negative aspect of what policemen do, and that seems to overshadow any good works that policemen do.
I mean, it's only fair sometimes when you expect good from people and they do something bad. But I think humans are like that. Yeah. We often forget the good in people as soon as there's one bad thing. Yeah. So you end up just running with it.
Yeah, and that's really the case because, you know, when I look back and I see, for example, the police complaints authority speaking about, they are narrating what actually happened by way of a factual position. Mm-hmm. But then when that information comes out here, is the way it happens in terms of it is twisted and massaged to say that, you know, sometimes you hear it have a police death squad and these different things, which I say is nonsense. But I also say to persons, you know, when you look at it and you understand that you have 400 plus murders annually every year, then you would have to expect that police engagement would also result in the death of persons, because these young men who pick up arms, they are not going to just willingly give up themselves. It is in a rare circumstance that, you know, they do, and even if they don't, what you find is that policemen, when they respond with the mindset that that their lives are in danger. So it's a hard balancing act, but that's the reality of it.
So you're saying that respect is the most challenging?
I think it would be. I think what I've seen in terms of Commissioner Griffith coming on, I think persons have done a double take in terms of the police service. I think the Commissioner's struggle really is about bringing the atmosphere that you need to trust all police. Yes. And I think that's his challenge, because whilst he might be doing good, and he has been boasting about SORT and the ERP, and to some extent some pockets of performance, he has to embrace all performance and market all performance as being reliable and trustworthy. He cannot take away how the entire organization functions. So that's his challenge.
And speaking of SORT, yesterday we would have seen an exercise where there was a raid. I think it's 12 Venezuelan women. Are you at liberty to tell us any updates on that?
The only update is that those persons will be dealt with according to law and they'll be brought before courts. But I think what you have to look at is the news release of the Commissioner. The news release of the Commissioner is very telling in that two things he has identified. One, how persons in the different spheres of society, activists or journalists as the case would be, is attacking SORT in terms of SORT's performance, and because of SORT being able to really make some inroads into the type of crimes that are being committed. And then the other part of it is the question of what is happening with the police service itself in terms of the success of that raid had to take into consideration mechanism to really screen out some of the activities of some policemen who are rogue, sending information to those would be targets of criminal intervention. So criminal activities and criminal interventions and the whole question of law enforcement trying to eradicate that. And I think that's two of the telling things for the police service.
I want to touch a little bit on human trafficking, but before we go there, you've just mentioned rogue cops, and I know that has been something you've been talking about since
Exactly.
many years ago. But do you think that we could really do away with rogue officers?
I don't think we can, because you have to look at it in terms of societal, what society has given to us. In any organization, you will have those type of leakages in terms of employees just being bad employees.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, from a police service, a person in a position of trust. And once you breach that trust, you become rogue.
Yeah.
So no matter what you do, you are going to have that. What we have to do is try to minimize that and develop strategies to quickly identify persons who may possibly be perpetrators of those type of activities. I think the organization still has a long way to go in identifying that, because your strategies, as Mr. Griffith would have done, like polygraph testing and
Yes.
substance abuse, that's his strategy in trying to rid that. But I think for us, what we have to do is to develop a strong whistleblower policy so that it insulates a lot of person when they do come forward with the information. Because oftentimes, it has been my experience that policemen do know who are the persons who are bent on doing wrong things, and they cannot deny that. It's a question of how we throw something to make sure we alert ourselves to that system and deal with the person. Commissioner approach is more a broad brush approach to try to streamline persons into a funnel so that he gets the best out of it. But I think we need to really ramp up what we are doing.
You just spoke about polygraph testing, and I know you've been in support of it. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, polygraph testing is really from a position of a law enforcement principle. For a policeman, he must be honest. And it's about, if he cannot be an honest policeman, then he shouldn't be a policeman, period. That's my personal belief. As to now the leadership of the association, as to how they take it, that's a matter for them. And one of the things I had shared, and I will continue to maintain, is that every single officer should be polygraphed. And when you have the commissioner saying, listen, if you're polygraphing anybody, let it begin with me. And that's demonstration of his leadership. And for the association, it cannot be a position that you decide to polygraph persons and then you take a position that you need to be consulted first and you need to look at policies and things. I think it's a bad thing, and they will find themselves in problem, because when the commissioner had made the comment, if you see shortly after, there was a problem in Citrus Police Station.
Yes.
And I know that if I am to make the nexus between the commissioner's statement and that happening, the commissioner would have had that information in his mind when he made that statement. So, it's foolhardy to now say that you act as an obstacle to it. What you should do is encourage it, because at the end of the day, you would not want a rogue police officer to be policing your own family.
Yeah, and the country as a whole stand to benefit from it.
Of course.
And I think that is where trust again would be regained. I mean, as it is, how do you think the trust is in terms of citizens of police?
Well, one of the things that I've said is that I have not done a study to determine that, but let's look at, I know, some of the interactions I've had with a lot of people. A lot of persons trust the commissioner. And they trust the commissioner to such an extent they trust his leadership. As to the rest of the police service, we're not too certain as to how persons, because you would still have the pockets of persons saying that, police are still abusing their power.
Yeah.
But I think the commissioner is making some considerable stride in the area, and the more he does is the more he wins over the hearts and minds of persons. But I have the view that it should be a holistic view, that the entire police service should be the police service that he's winning over the trust of the public for. I think when he would have mentioned to me that he did a study, he has won the hearts of most policemen, where based on our studies, that at least 84% of the police officers trust him as the commissioner of police and as the leader of the organization. So that augurs well for him.
Yeah.
I want that to translate to the populace having at least 84% of the population trusting the entire police service.
I hope that happens sometime sooner rather than later. Going back to an issue we were just talking about, human trafficking. That is a real issue in this country, and it's not something that has been overnight. It's something that's probably now taking spotlight for whatever strange reason, but it's something that has always been in this country. whether we want to accept it or not. In your capacity, how much of a problem this is in this country?
I think we don't understand how much of a problem because, as you rightly said, it's now surfacing, and persons are now getting people are now seeing it by way of drawing their attention to it. I worked the Organized Crime and Narcotics Bureau in the latter part of the 90s, and it was a problem since then in terms of that, but we did not treat it as such. When you look at some of the, as the Commissioner is rightfully targeting the place, some of the brothels, some of the prostitution rings, you would see that that was the prime target of the activities of human trafficking. So it was good during them times, and I know I can imagine. I wasn't speaking about the 90s, but I've heard stories about the 80s and see files that would have, extend a long time into some of these investigations. Now the Commissioner is actually taking the bull by the horn and doing something about it, and now we have, counter-trafficking units and these different things that have been formed by government because of the real issue of it. We don't know until it really surfaces. I mean, you would have had people charged for it, including policemen who have been investigated for. So we cannot deny that it is there. The question is how widespread it is, and only investigations will tell us.
What do you think would lead a cop to get involved in something like this?
Well, I think it's the question of not being caught. If you look at the southern peninsula and the way how things happen down there, in some pockets, you could understand that a lot of things happen down there, and because of the remoteness of the area,
it's unheard of.
Yeah, and that's really the thing about it, because working at narcotics section, I too would have had some experiences with that area, and you shudder to think that why would a policeman get himself in there? But what we do not understand is that the emphasis of the police service did not take into account that we need to be very vigilant in those areas.
Yeah.
It only surfaced because of the issue of the Venezuelan migration. So now with a lot of attention that has been brought to bear on it, it should have been there from before, because they now realize that this has been going on quite some time, and I think that's really the challenge.
Yeah. And how do you think we can probably deal with it?
I think that we need to really rethink deployment of personnel, and that's just about police, it's about also members of the defense force and our intelligent environment. We need to really look at it, because part of what we have found over time is a lot of the firearms make its way to the country through Cedros and the surrounding areas, as well as the narcotics, as well as the issue of human trafficking. And I think if we do some more in terms of how we look at intelligence and how we really staff those areas from a protective services standpoint, I think we'll do a lot more better in the coming months and years.
Now, I know that you all have been talking about the uniform for police officers. Is that still something in the making?
It is. I have seen that there is now the legal notice that tells of legitimizing the whole question of the urban camouflage, which is one of the big ticket items to the Commissioner.
Yes.
And the government would have signaled that they are in fact doing that together with pepper spray tasers and camera and body-worn cameras. So those are ready into the budget. I mean, we are late before, we are in July now, so we are just waiting to see what happens with the police service and when it becomes a reality in terms of procurement and issue of these things for the use by policemen.
And what exactly was the new uniform again? I can't remember.
Right now, what the Commissioner has agreed to is different camouflage for different specialist units. So I will have checked at least 5 different offerings. Those offerings are in fact going to be worn by the officers of these specific. So SWOT, the different interagency task force, the emergency branch, the multi-operational police, and the general police, and the uniform will change as the time goes on.
Okay. And very interesting. If you had to go back, assume this position, would you do it all over?
Yeah, a million times over. I think for me, it's the ability to help persons. One of the things I always remember is that we had 2 officers, husband and wife, and I know the struggles was 2 things: getting their own home and promotion. And I remember when I know they wouldn't hate me for talking about it, but I ain't calling the name. But it was something that when I saw two grown persons cry in my office, when the success of owning their own home and getting promoted at the same time because they got promoted the same rank together, it was really, heart-wrenching to see that. So for me, that's some of the takeaway for me in terms of whether I would do something like this before, anything like this in the future. That is some of the things that would lead me and spur me on to do it again.
And welcome back to PSA TV. This is Eye on Labor. I'm your host, Christy Kalising. And before we went to a break, we were talking, we have on set the president of the Police Social Welfare Association, Mr. Michael Seals, Inspector Michael Seals, and we were talking about some of the takeaways he has from the police service. We just touched a bit on rogue officers and if it's possible to get rid of them, but it's a work in progress.
Work in progress.
What percent do you think of cops are rogue?
Well, that's one of the hardest questions to answer because I know some people put it around at least between 1% and 3%. But even saying that is still too many.
Yeah.
The question is really about why I say that. I look at it from the position of the amount of police officers, just over 10,000 strong, and the question of how much in the past would have been able to find themselves before the court on the basis of being rogue. So that's just a rough average and some of the conversations you would hear. But I don't think it's that widespread because sometimes people confuse the whole question of rogue being question of persons not having the right attitude, the right aptitude in terms of work performance, and that must be confused. A rogue officer is simply an officer who does something or abuses power for the benefit of himself or somebody else, whether it's by money or some favor, as the case may be. That is how I would determine a rogue officer.
When you look at the involvement of youths, the younger ones coming into the police service, is there a high involvement?
Yes, you find a lot of persons engaged in the police service, but one of the things that we have not as an organization done is trying to develop strategies to recruit persons. We still are at the point where we're using the old method of recruiting in terms of posting the advertisement and really allowing persons to come forward. I think that has hurt us in the past. So for example, getting Tobago, officers from Tobago, male persons to come to join the police, we have never had that in the last couple of years. So that has been a problem where you have to actually take police officers from Trinidad, male officers, to go to Tobago. It's so bad that the population of the Tobago police is more populated with female officers than male officers. So you have to understand some of the dynamics of it. More importantly, when you look at what we are having as persons come in and you see the challenges in terms of them not being able to pass the polygraph test or even the simple POPAT test, which is the physical aspect of it to get in, you know that persons are not taking care of themselves and it's a different thing, but it's our society generally. I think there are some ripe areas where we can start to look at developing persons. For example, the Police Youth Club, the Special Reserve System should be the systems used to recruit persons into the police service. But again, that's left for the Commissioner in terms of his strategic vision and what he decides to do in the future.
Let's talk about you as president of the association. Top 3 things that you would have done for the association?
Well, one of the things
not to toot your own horn, but of course to recognize what you've done.
I wouldn't toot my horn, and I bring them very simply. First in order is about bringing harmony amongst my colleagues in terms of the branch representatives, that it was a total love in terms of how we did things, because I shared my leadership with the entire population of police officers who have given themselves to serve, and it made my job easier. That was the first thing. The second thing was the question of building relationship with the various stakeholders, which was really important for me and my success. So that's the second. The last thing was really acquiring a home as I said before, in Caripachana, which the association for more than 28 years never had their own home. So that was a phenomenal feat for me. It's a question of what the organization does with it now in terms of developing it and harnessing it for the best use of the membership.
I know sometimes police officers have challenges in terms of the manner in which they are housed, some of these stations. What are some of the challenges exactly, being first-hand experiences?
Well, it's difficult because I think one of the things that is a stranglehold on us is the way how we dispose of property that comes into the possession of police officers. And sometimes these things, I mean, you could look at the whole question of derelict vehicles and vehicles that were involved in accident. You had to see it was a mammoth task for the commissioner to get rid of all these vehicles in front of the St. James, persons would say the academy, some would know it as the barracks, and what he had to do to get rid of it and the amount of red tape just to get rid of those things, to make it, to uplift the place. And that is so for all stations because you have a lot of fires, and it's not being disposed of properly. I went to Marval Station, that would have been Saturday, and Marval Station is supposed to be one of the recently built stations in a couple of years, few years I would say, but the station is in a horrific state, and I can imagine for other places that I have seen. But the point is this, I think the strategy should be going forward is a question of moving officers out of stations so that some of the issues that pervades us in terms of our environment will no longer obtain. Because the commissioner's strategy is really to collapse stations so that you have more officers out on the beat, and so that the question of amenity of the station doesn't become an issue. If we leave it in the current format, it will become an issue, and it will pose a lot of health hazards as we go along in the future.
And speaking of health hazards, are there any health hazards?
Yes, we would have had in the past at the Separia police station with some outbreak of TB, and officers would have suffered some issues in relation to that because of personnel and how they are housed and the whole question of sanitation of the various places as a result of that. But again, if we look at different ways of different strategies, those things can be minimized.
When you look at salaries for police officers or compensation, do you think police officers are properly paid?
No, I don't believe that. But you have to take it in the context that every single officer, up to the assistant commissioners, are being compensated on the principle of 5O levels. And if you are being compensated on the principle of 5O levels, you would see that KFC is now at 3O levels and looking at being at 5O level. So you have to understand the compensation factors. But the issue becomes that because of how the CPO treats that, is that officers do that training. And that training takes them to a level, at least a diploma level of in law enforcement, but it's not recognized as that because it is being done by the organization rather than the policeman acquiring it, and that's really the real problem.
In terms of police vehicles, do you say we have sufficient vehicles?
I think we have sufficient vehicles. It's a question of the use of the vehicles. Part of what you have is that sometimes you have a lot of downtime with vehicles, and the question of maintenance in terms of repairs and maintenance is a major issue in terms of management. If I am to say anything or to contribute to it is the ERP is really a gold mine. It's a question of how the commissioner uses that gold mine. I would have had some contributions in terms of what would have happened for the carnival in the question of one man in a vehicle, so that you get that type of coverage, so that you have less wear and tear on the other vehicles that are in service. So it has so much things that he can do. It's a question of really repeating that philosophy for carnival and making sure that it works for the entire nation.
I know there's been a lot of talk about the blue lights. Do you think that there is anything perhaps that can be done? The lights itself has been, a lot of people objected.
Well, the thing about it, it's twofold. The blue lights just really gives the question of present. So if a criminal is coming into the area, scientifically it's proven that he would not commit a crime once he sees the light or he knows the lights are wrong. It's based on a hotspot philosophy coming out of the computer statistics model. So the question is that it works. I know people may find, I myself get problem because of the light in it. It can make you feel sick.
Yes.
But it really helps you in the long run because it alerts you to where the police is at. And whilst it alerting you to where the police is at so that you can access calls to service, it also gives you the benefit of deterring the person from committing crime. So it has its benefits. And its benefits far outweighs the price we have to pay for it.
All right. As you take your leave from the association and from the TTPS itself, like you just told me, are there anything that you perhaps would have started that you may not have completed, or is there anything that you were working on?
I had a number of relationships that I was working on, particularly in the area of training with Protect group of companies, and where policemen can really defend their lives. Because what I found is that there's a void in terms of what you call close combat. Close combat fights. Officers are not trained in that area. It's called CQB, close quarter battles. They are not trained in that way in terms of when they attack as officers, in terms of responding to violent offenders, especially persons armed with firearm. So I would have partnered with that group to, for them to give that type of training, that kind of support to the association. So it's available for persons who coming on to utilize that, because training is a big thing in terms of really reshaping and the whole image of the organization. Sometimes the organization doesn't respond to that, because once you're trained, that's all. Yes, you do have pockets of training, and people campaign, it's very selective. But I think what the association has to do is to really take the bull by the horn and really get into the whole aspect of developing the police officer to be a better model citizen and a better model officer.
Do you think perhaps it's time that the qualifications increase?
Of course, because when you go on foreign courses, you find that, so for example, you go UK, you have somebody who come in to talk to you just barely 35, 40 years old, and you might be a senior officer well into your 50s or close to your 60th birthday, but you are being trained by that younger person. And so that in itself, and when you look at in terms of parallel of rank, and that person is at your rank or probably above your rank, or probably have expertise in law enforcement that far beyond yours, but because of you not being able to just, or you coming into the police service with just barely school leaving or 5 level, it doesn't augur well. I think that's something that the organization has to look at. Whilst you may train a person in terms of getting a diploma, it's time to look at persons with first degrees and in specialized areas. And the Commissioner has signaled that also too, so it is there. Prime Minister in the past would have said, it's time to have an officer corps where you take officers from training from out of the university, so that they come and they reshape the organization, so that the organization gets a real push in particularly in the managerial aspects and leadership aspects, so that you don't have to worry about choosing a leader from the upcoming ranks in the future.
I think even if that is implemented, it will encourage people, or younger persons, for instance, to study and go, not just when you come out of school, you have a job automatically that you can apply to. Because, I mean, a first degree in this day and age, it's slowly replaced a 5 CXC or a 3 CXC. So I think that is really something that should be looked into.
Yes, it should. A lot of persons don't know, when you look at organizations across the world, this is something they had to battle with. One of the famous policemen in the world, Mr. William Bratton, would have recognized that early. What he did is take those persons who had that type of qualification and start to develop some strategies, which made him very, very successful and very sought after in the entire world as one of the leading policemen. He was brought here by the Ministry of National Security more than one occasion here. So he is one of the premier persons in law enforcement and has been looked and revered as that. But if you look at what he would have done to get to that point, is really tapping on the resources of the human capital, particularly young persons and young persons who are pursuing tertiary education to really take us to that level.
Just to step away from that, I'm watching my time here, so I'm going to ask you, what is your advice to your successors?
Well, I think for my successors, I would suggest to them is you cannot do it alone. You have to look at letting the organization stand behind you and rally behind you, because more often than not, you take a mandate from the leadership, from a majority position. And once they say that, the question is finding the solution based on that majority position. And once the majority feels that you take what they have to say as valuable, then they will support you and you become more successful in the future. And I think that is really where the new group of persons have to find themselves, develop the strategies based on that.
Are you pleased with your successes?
Yeah, incidentally, though the team that I was supporting lost, only one person would have won from that team. Persons don't know that two of the premier persons from that particular team was part of that team. It's just disagreements, and they parted ways and formed their own team. So It's more of the same, and they would have worked considerably with me. I'm not tooting my own horn, but I think we shared some of the same ideas. There's a question of how they view their leadership and what they want to do.
And now execution?
Yes, about execution now.
All right. Your closing comments?
My closing comments is that, take into the consideration that I'm the part in the police service and what is out there for me. The question is what do I look at or say to the police service on the part here? I think that the police service has the wherewithal to really make good inroads into crime, but it takes some effort. And not just about that effort, is about the change of mindset, because we cannot no longer be doing the same things and feel that we operate in the same manner, operating out of a police station. We need to be out on the road. We need to really look at some of the dynamic ways law enforcement try to improve their calls to service and the delivery of service. I think that's what I would want to say. And it's part of me saying to also to the new persons coming on that you have a responsibility to ensure that transition is smooth, and also that you play a major part in that and have a say as a stakeholder. I think once you have that opportunity, you have to actually put the country first and not the membership at times when you know it's better for the country. So that's the balancing act for them.
All right, Inspector C's, I want to thank you so much for coming on this morning. I know it's a really short notice, but thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to also wish you well in your future endeavors. I know you said you were pursuing your doctorate. Okay. So congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
Being a police officer is not something that is, it's very risky.
Yes,
we live in a day and age where it's even more riskier than then. So to make it through, I'm not going to ask you how many years you've served, but you've come this far. So it's really nice, and I'm actually very privileged to be to know you from since then to now. So I've seen the improvements between yourself and Mr. Ramasa. I've seen the police service through good times, bad times. So it's really nice, and congratulations to you.
Thank you.
All right. So it's on that note we've come to the end of this segment for today, and that brings us to the end of our show for today. So you've ended our shows for today.
Thank you.
All right. So I am your host, Christy Callising, wishing you and yours a very good day.